Every October since 2011, Retro Movie Geek has brought you the spooky side of retro movies. And this year is no different. So, a haunting we will go, as we dig up classic tales of ghosts and hauntings that are 20 years old or older. But remember, we spoil the hell out of every movie we cover. So consider yourself forewarned. Spooky Flix Fest starts now.
Hello, horror fiends, and welcome to Guess What? You're Wrong, the podcast where we dive into all things horror and spoil the hell out of every movie we discuss. With me, Big D, as your host, be prepared for a terrifyingly good time. From classic slasher flicks to contemporary horror masterpieces, we're going to explore the genre from every angle that we can and leave no stone unturned. Horror, prints, and shine. New conversations, same podcast. So buckle up, Bonehead, because you're going for a ride.
Enjoy the show!
Now, before we get into this episode too far, I just got a little disclaimer here. First off, all audio used in this podcast is used under the protection of fair use. And as with all the movie reviews that I do here on Guess What? You're Wrong, we're going to spoil the hell out of every single thing we talk about. So, you have been warned.
This is a house where no one should live. Roger Cobb has come here alone. But no one is ever alone in the house.
Leave while you can. No!
Sandy.
Horror has found a new home. House. Enter at your own risk.
Hello, horror fiends, and welcome back to another spooktacular episode of Guess What? You're Wrong. Now, for this special episode, my friends over at Retro Movie Geek invited me to join them for Spooky Flix Fest 2023. And Joel, Daryl, and Peter, I gotta thank you for that. So buckle up, Bonehead, and let's dive head first into a cult classic that's been haunting our dreams since 1985. House, directed by Steve Miner and written by Fred Decker and Ethan Wiley, starring William Catt, Kay Lenz, George Wendt, and of course, Richard Mole, to name a few. Now, thinking back on this movie, it came out in 1985. I was about 11 years old at the time, so this was one of those movies that when my mom took me to the video store, I was able to convince her that, it wasn't really that scary. It was something, along the lines of Saturday the 14th, and it's something that I had to convince my mom of, and I did. Now, I was enthralled with the movie. I was young. It wasn't right when it came out. It was probably a year or two later, so I was probably 12, 13, something like that. I don't know. But I was enthralled with the movie. My mom, not so much. She wasn't a huge horror fan, but she was hoping it was going to be more comedy, but I was happy with it the way it was. Now, our journey begins with this story with Roger Cobb, played by the talented William Catt, of which I remember mostly from the spectacular TV show from the 80s, The Greatest American Hero. Roger is a troubled writer, okay? He's dealing with his dark past, and he inherits his aunt's mysterious, spooky house. But this isn't your ordinary haunted house. It's a place where his past experiences from the Vietnam War and the disappearance of his son, Jimmy, come to life. What makes House truly captivating are the characters. Roger Cobb, our protagonist, he heads off on a journey of self-discovery and healing. His neighbor, Harold Gordon, played by George Wendt from Cheers fame. Yep, you know, where everybody knows your name. And an interesting piece of trivia is that in House 2, the second story, it features an appearance by John Ratzenberger, who plays Norm's best friend, Cliff, in Cheers. Now, he adds a dash of comic relief. Now, Roger's ex-wife, Sandy, who's played by Kay Lenz, brings emotional depth to the story as she struggles with her own guilt and grief. Wow, that was a mouthful, right? Whew. Now, House. Now, this is a roller coaster of horror elements, from eerie noises to ghostly apparitions. It's got all the classic haunted house scares. But what sets it apart are the unexpected moments of terror. Now, remember that grotesque creature in the closet, don't you? Or the possessed tools that attack Roger? The scares in this film are both spine-tingling and strangely amusing. Now, the visual style of House is just awesome. Now, the haunted house itself is a character with its own eccentric architecture and shifting interiors. And another funny thing is that the interior of this house is actually a 2-story model that they made at Desilu Studios. You know, Lucy and Desi Arnaz. Now, the practical effects used in this film, including the creature designs, are a testament to the creativity of the 80s horror scene. And let's not forget unforgettable scenes like Roger's journey back into a war-torn jungle dimension within the house. Now, the film's soundtrack, it's composed by Harry Manfredi. Now, if you recognize Harry Manfredi, think of Friday the 13th. That's right. We have Sean S. Cunningham, who produced House, who also produced the Friday the 13th movies, and Harry Manfredi, who wrote the music for this and for the Friday the 13th movies as well. Now, the soundtrack, it beautifully complements the eerie atmosphere. You know, the sound effects like creaking floorboards and spectral whispers keep you on the edge of your seat. Now, what's intriguing is how House uses sound to seamlessly transition between horror and humor, creating a unique listening experience, in my opinion. Now, House isn't just about scares. It delves deeper. Okay, it's a story of trauma. You know, both personal trauma from the loss of his son and the trauma from the battlefield. Now, like several horror films of the 70s and 80s and the early 90s, one of the major themes of this film is mental trauma of the Vietnam War. This is relived and dreamt of by Roger. Now, this can largely be attributed to the recognition of PTSD in 1980 by the American Psychiatric Association and an increased popular understanding throughout those decades of PTSD symptoms, nightmares, flashbacks, that kind of stuff, as well as the increasing number of Vietnam veterans who committed suicide as a result of their wartime experiences. The haunted house becomes a symbol of Roger's internal struggle, with each room representing a facet of his past. The film also touches on themes of fatherhood and wartime sacrifice. Thank you, IMDb. Now let's go ahead and delve into some juicy spoilers. Now, remember the closet monster? It's tied to Roger's past in a disturbing way. I guess they had to make that closet monster. They were trying to make it look like some of those burnt up victims or something like that from Vietnam. So that's a little odd. And the seemingly innocent painting of Roger's aunt, it hides a dark secret that is central to the plot's resolution. Now, the painting itself is a little odd as well, because you see that painting, he pulls off that rag or something off the painting, and we see like a medicine cabinet mirror with his son, a picture of his son, like screaming in it. So it leads us to believe, and Roger as well, that this is where he needs to go to try and find his son. But does he find his son? Roger's journey into different dimensions adds layers of complexity to this tale. Yeah, because we know that he gets sucked in back into Vietnam and finds his old buddy, Big Ben, played by Richard Mole, who, I guess in the Vietnam War, the scenes that we see here, he started going a little nuts and just started shooting everybody, and it was going crazy. He ended up getting captured by the Vietnamese and tortured. So this is our antagonist of the story here, which going forward, we're going to see how Roger has to deal with that pain and with that guilt that he's held all these years for what happened to Big Ben. Now, before I go any further, really, I want to make mention of these ghouls that we see. I mean, we see these two ghouls. Roger is babysitting for the neighbor's girl. That's a whole story inside of itself as well. But Roger's watching this little boy. He's trying to figure out how he's going to keep this little boy safe from the house of because he knows what's going on in the house. But at one point here, we see these two little ghoul children grab this kid and yank him up into the chimney, the fireplace. Wow, and then you can't leave out the neighbor who turns into this fat ghoul in the purple dress kind of looking thing who gets her head cut off and her hand cut off and finds her hand in the toilet. The practical effects in this movie are spectacular. Being made directly smack dab in the middle of the 80s lends to some of the greatest practical effects that we've ever seen that I can ever remember. And if you disagree with me, hey, guess what? You're wrong. Now, at first, House didn't get a very warm welcome in 1985, but over the years, it has become a cult classic. Its influence can be seen in subsequent horror comedies that try to capture the same unique blend. For those of us who appreciate unconventional horror, it's a spectaculicious gem. Now, how does House stack up against other horror comedy films? Well, it's daring and emotionally charged, making it stand out. Now, if you're a fan of horror comedy, this one's a must-watch. And if House left you craving for more and wanting more, I'd recommend films like The Evil Dead Part 2. Groovy. And you can check out episode 67 of my podcast, Guess What? You're Wrong, where we dove into Evil Dead Part 2. Shameless plug. Or Tucker and Dale versus Evil. Now, these are similar genre experiences, the comedy horror kind of thing. They're awesome. Now, House is a timeless classic that defies genre conventions. Its mix of genuine scares, dark humor, and compelling character arcs makes it a must-see for fans of unconventional horror. Its ability to deliver spine-chilling moments while maintaining an offbeat sense of humor ensures its place in horror history. Now, in the film's climax here, we have Roger saves his son. So they come up out of a swimming pool. Now they're about to leave the house through the front door, but Big Ben shows up to stop them. Big Ben wants Roger to kill himself. Now Roger sends Jimmy for help. Roger learns that the Viet Cong had tortured him, Big Ben, for weeks before actually killing him, and he wants revenge now. Eventually, Big Ben's going after Roger, but he runs out of ammo. So he throws away his shotgun. Now, eventually, Roger finds himself back in the house. Roger eventually rips off one of Big Ben's arms, and now this is where he actually faces this. He comes to terms with, his whole inner turmoil stuff here. Grabs a grenade, pops it into Big Ben. He walks out of the house with his son. Big Ben blows up. Happy ending, right? Or so we thought, because they did make a part 2. But that's for another podcast. If you haven't explored this haunted house yet, I highly recommend you take the plunge and check it out. Now, all in all, through the years, this movie has held up quite well for me. On this past rewatch, I was really surprised. I mean, I know the 80s were, a great time for practical effects. And I was really surprised watching it this many years later. I think the last time I watched it before this last watch through was it's probably been about 10 years. But I was really surprised still about, how those practical effects look pretty darn good. corny at times and cheesy at times, but you know what? I still love them. Even how they did Big Ben at the end, the skeleton with the bones and everything, it was great. I still love it. And even the little ghouls, like I mentioned earlier, the ghouls that they have, you can tell that there's a lot of prosthetics and, puppetry and all that stuff, but it looks spectacular to me. I still love this movie, and I will continue to love this movie. And I'm actually going to put this back on my media server and watch it again. Now, the next thing I got to do is get House 2 to check that out again to see how well that holds up. I don't really remember that one too much, to be honest, but I'm going to check it out. We'll see how it holds up, and maybe I'll do a podcast on that one. We'll see. And, of course, you can agree with me if you want to, but if you disagree, guess what? That's right. You're wrong. Now, before I shut down this review and close it out, once again, I want to thank my friends over at Retro Movie Geek Podcast. Joel, Peter, Daryl, you guys are great. I've been a fan for a long time. Everybody out there, sleep well, love, peace, and chicken grace. And that's going to do it for the day. Thanks for hanging out with me and letting me bend your ear for a while. Ain't no time for bad shine. And until next time, don't forget, you're wrong.
Later, Tater.
This concludes our broadcast day. Good night, and God bless America.
Thank you for listening. Get all the spookiness you can handle this October by subscribing to Mom and Pop Video Shop on YouTube. You can also find Retro Movie Geek on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you dig up your podcasts. The spooktastic music you heard at the beginning and end of this episode was provided courtesy of Ed and Gavin and their band, Midnight Syndicate. We want to thank them for the use of music from their albums Gates of Delirium and The 13th Hour. Want to sink your ghostly claws into this and all Midnight Syndicate's beautifully macabre music? Then go to midnightsyndicate.com. And remember, spooky is as spooky does.